The grandstands were still buzzing when the yellow flag came out. At first, nobody understood what had happened. It was a warm afternoon at Road Atlanta, engines screaming down the back straight, the smell of hot brakes and racing fuel drifting through the Georgia air. Thousands of fans leaned forward in their seats, watching a young driver chase something bigger than himself. A factory-backed car, a career, a future worth millions. Then suddenly, silence on the radio. One moment the car was there, slicing through the field with surgical precision. The next moment, it wasn't. A plume of dust lifted beyond the tree line. Track marshals began running. The announcer's voice cracked, and somewhere inside the twisted metal of a prototype race car, the engine was still running. That engine would soon become the center of one of the most uncomfortable questions in American racing. Because it wasn't supposed to fail, it wasn't supposed to behave like that. And depending on who you ask today, it may have never been meant for a human driver at all. The driver's name was Daniel Mercer. Most fans outside hardcore sports car racing had never heard of him. But inside the paddock, Mercer was the kind of young talent teams quietly fought over. 26 years old, Midwestern kid from Ohio, dirt track roots, the type of driver who could feel a car's balance through the steering wheel like a musician hears pitch. Old school mechanics loved him, engineers respected him, sponsors liked his smile. He didn't come from money. No wealthy father buying seats, no corporate connections, just speed, and an almost stubborn refusal to quit. By the early 1990s, Mercer was climbing through America's racing ladder the hard way, driving whatever teams could afford to put under him. IMSA endurance races, regional championships, occasional test drives for factory programs. That's how he got the call. A small but ambitious team based in North Carolina had just secured something enormous, an experimental engine program funded quietly by a major American automaker. The company never officially confirmed their involvement, but the rumors spread fast through the paddock. Millions of dollars were suddenly flowing into a team that, just a year earlier, struggled to afford tires. They had a new prototype chassis, a wind tunnel-tested body, and at the center of it all, a brand new racing engine. An engine the company hoped could embarrass European manufacturers on American soil, an engine designed not just to win races, but to rewrite the reputation of an entire brand. The early tests were electric, literally. The first time Mercer climbed into the prototype, the crew gathered around the pit wall like nervous parents watching a kid ride a bike for the first time. The engine roared to life with a sound nobody expected. It wasn't the deep thunder of traditional American V8s. It was sharper, angrier, a high-pressure scream that echoed across the empty track. Turbocharged, aggressive, violent power. When Mercer came back into the pits, he pulled off his helmet and just laughed. "Whatever you guys built," he said, "it's insane." The data backed it up. The engine was producing power levels that rivaled the dominant European teams. Porsche, Jaguar, Nissan, all suddenly had a new threat. For a brief moment, it looked like the gamble had worked. Sponsors were lining up. Television coverage was growing. American fans loved the idea of a homegrown machine taking the fight to foreign racing giants. And at the center of that story was Daniel Mercer, the young driver with the impossible car. But something about the engine worried the engineers. Not its speed, its behavior. The problem showed up first during long runs. At high boost levels, the engine didn't behave like a typical racing motor. Throttle response could spike. Power delivery sometimes came in sudden waves. On paper, everything looked within tolerance. Temperatures were fine. Pressures looked stable. But drivers are human sensors. And Mercer noticed something. During a late test session, he pulled the car in early. He didn't look scared, just thoughtful. "There's a moment," he told the crew chief, "where the power doesn't feel connected to the pedal." The engineers checked everything: throttle cables, fuel mapping, turbo controls, nothing obvious. The manufacturer's representatives insisted it was normal, just the nature of such an aggressive turbo system. Drivers, they explained, would need to adapt. And adapt Mercer did, because racing drivers always do. If the car is fast enough, they learn its personality. They live with the danger, but the danger was growing, quietly. The first public race revealed both sides of the machine. When the green flag dropped, the prototype exploded off the line like a missile. Within 5 laps, Mercer had climbed 4 positions. The crowd loved it. Announcers began talking about the American turbo monster. But by mid-race, things got strange. Onboard cameras showed Mercer fighting the steering wheel through corners. The car jerked forward unpredictably. Exiting one turn, the rear tires spun violently, far beyond what traction control systems should allow. Still, Mercer held it together, and against expectations, he finished on the podium. Third place, a tiny team standing beside factory giants. Sponsors celebrated. The manufacturer quietly smiled. Millions of dollars in marketing value from a single race. But behind the scenes, Mercer said something that made the crew uneasy. "We're fast," he told them, "but this thing feels like it wants to decide its own speed." The following weeks brought pressure, corporate pressure. The automaker wanted results. The program had already cost tens of millions. Executives expected headlines, magazine covers, victories. The team's engineers pushed the engine harder, more boost, more aggressive fuel mapping, more risk. Each test session produced unbelievable lap times, but the same strange behavior kept appearing. Small surges of power, moments where the engine seemed to react half a second late, then overreact. Drivers in other series might have refused, but Mercer was chasing something bigger, a factory contract, a lifetime seat, maybe even Le Mans. This was his chance, and everyone in the paddock knew it. Then came Road Atlanta, the race that would define everything. The weekend started perfectly. Practice sessions showed the prototype at the top of the timing sheets. Commentators began calling Mercer a future star. The car was untouchable on straightaways. Fans gathered along the fences just to hear the engine scream past. But inside the garage, tension hung in the air. During one final data review, an engineer noticed something subtle. A brief spike in throttle response at high boost. Milliseconds, barely visible, but enough to ask a question. What if the turbo control system is overcorrecting? There wasn't time to redesign anything. Race day had arrived, and corporate representatives were already sitting in the VIP suites. When the green flag waved, Mercer attacked. The prototype surged through traffic with terrifying speed. Lap after lap, the engine delivered unbelievable power. Fans could feel it in their chests as the car blasted past the stands. But something else was happening. On lap 27, Mercer reported the first surge, a sudden jump in acceleration mid-corner. He caught it, kept going. The team told him to monitor it. 5 laps later, it happened again. Bigger this time. Still, he stayed in the race. Still, the car remained among the leaders. Because drivers like Mercer are wired a certain way. If the machine is fast enough, they believe they can control it. Right up until the moment they can't. The final surge came on the back straight. Full throttle, maximum boost. Witnesses later said the car suddenly lunged forward as if someone had stomped the accelerator, but Mercer already had his foot down. At over 180 miles per hour, the extra power sent the rear tires loose. The prototype snapped sideways. Mercer tried to catch it. For a split second, he almost did. Then the car left the asphalt. Dust erupted. The vehicle struck the barrier beyond the track. Marshals rushed toward the wreckage, and inside the broken chassis, the engine was still screaming. Racing stopped that day. The paddock went quiet. News helicopters circled overhead. Television cameras cut away. For the fans, it was a tragic accident. But inside the garages, whispers started immediately. Something about the engine. Something about that surge. The investigation lasted months. Engineers combed through data. Lawyers reviewed internal emails. And what they discovered was deeply uncomfortable. The turbo control system, designed to deliver maximum boost at any cost, could occasionally misinterpret throttle input under extreme load. When it happened, the engine didn't just respond, it overcorrected, delivering a sudden burst of power the driver hadn't asked for. In normal testing, the spike lasted milliseconds. But at racing speeds, milliseconds can decide everything. The manufacturer never publicly admitted fault. Official reports called it a complex racing incident. The engine program was quietly canceled months later. The prototype disappeared from competition. Corporate press releases focused on strategic redirection. But inside the racing world, people remembered. Because Mercer wasn't the only driver who had reported the strange behavior. He was simply the one who encountered it at the worst possible moment. Years later, former engineers would hint that the system had been rushed, that executives wanted results too quickly, that warnings had been buried beneath corporate optimism. No lawsuits ever reached trial. Settlements were handled privately. The company moved on. New engines, new programs, new headlines. But the story never completely vanished. Today, if you visit certain garages in the American racing scene, you might still hear Mercer's name. Mechanics who were there will shake their heads slowly. Not because racing is dangerous. Everyone in the sport understands that. But because sometimes, the danger isn't just the speed. Sometimes it's the machine itself, the ambition behind it, the pressure to win before the technology is ready. Some engineers who worked on that engine still refuse to talk about it publicly. Others claim the surge problem was exaggerated, that Mercer's crash was simply racing luck running out. And maybe they're right. But there's one detail that keeps the mystery alive. During the investigation, data logs from Mercer's final lap were partially corrupted. Most of the telemetry survived: speed, boost pressure, steering angle, but the exact throttle signal at the moment of the surge was never fully recovered, which means the most important question in the entire story still doesn't have an answer. Did the engine betray the driver, or did the driver ask for power that the machine simply gave him too well? 30 years later, nobody can say for sure, but somewhere in an old storage facility, sealed inside crates of forgotten racing parts, that experimental engine still exists, silent, cold, and carrying a secret that may never fully come out.